Namaskar. Hello and welcome to Sunset TV podcast. I am Namrata Singh. In our podcast today, we will explore pressing global issues ranging from the strategic dynamics of the Quad Alliance to the evolving nature of warfare in the 21st century. As India balances its security needs with its commitment to global peace, we will examine the recent geopolitical developments and their significance. Joining us on the podcast is Ambassador Sujan Shenoy. He is Director General of the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defence Studies and Analysis and author of the recently released insightful book Global Tumult: India as a Pole Star. As the former chair of the Think 20 Engagement Group for India's G20 presidency, Ambassador Shenoy offers a unique perspective on these critical issues. We will explore his expertise and the takeaway from his latest book in details. Let me begin the conversation with you, Mr. Shenoy, with the recently held Quad meeting in Tokyo, where the four ministers reaffirmed their commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific and bolstering maritime security. So, how significant and relevant is Quad's role in promoting global good and ensuring an inclusive, free and open Indo-Pacific in today's volatile world?
Thank you very much, Namrita, first of all, for having me on your Sunset TV podcast. It's a privilege to be here with you. As you know, the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, the acronym for which is the Quad, is in fact a very, very significant framework for plurilateral dialogue between India, the United States, Japan and Australia. The Quad, as it's popularly known, has its roots in a situation that took place many years ago. The Boxing Day tsunami in 2004 had led to India extend assistance to a number of neighboring countries through its maritime expeditionary power. And we saw that India cooperated then with the United States, Japan and Australia. And thereafter, there was a period in which there were no major dialogues between the four countries. But by 2017, the Quad had resurfaced as a DG level dialogue at the level of the Director General in the foreign ministries. And it went through very quickly to being elevated to the level of the foreign minister in 2019 and to the level of heads of state and heads of government in 2021. It's a very important dialogue because it stands for free and open navigation, freedom of navigation and overflight, unimpeded commerce on the high seas. It has 6 working groups that look at issues such as climate, cyber, infrastructure and connectivity, health, and also other relevant issues, for example, like illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing, maritime domain awareness. So these are issues that are of great significance today in a world in flux in which traditional multilateral structures are not delivering. They're not as efficient as one would like them to be. And it is up to like-minded countries like the members of the Quad to push the agenda forward.
Right, sir. So tell us more about Quad, as in how does this alliance work and how has it grown over these years, despite having different approaches, how these countries, the member countries, come together on a common goal?
So first of all, the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or the Quad, is not an alliance. Because when you suggest the word alliance, it gives the impression that it is a treaty-based alliance partnership, which it is not. It is basically a grouping for a dialogue on very important issues to do with things like humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, apart from the topics that I mentioned earlier, like climate, cyber, IUU, infrastructure, health, etc. And so it's basically a framework, a platform. It's a grouping that essentially has come together on the basis of shared values, largely because all these 4 countries that are members of the Quad are democratic countries. So democracy is a very important facet and aspect that brings them together.
Yes.
But that does not mean that the Quad cannot interact with others in a Quad plus format. For not everybody, not every country that the Quad may interact with in a Quad plus format is necessarily a democracy as we describe ourselves. These 4 countries also have their sui generis interests and priorities. For example, the United States, Japan and Australia have maritime priorities that are, in my view, more magnified than India's maritime priorities. India has priorities that may have more to do with the unique situation that prevails in our part of the world, particularly the
Indian Ocean.
The Indian Ocean region.
Yeah.
The Indian Ocean region is not just about maritime issues, such as piracy. It has a lot to do with it abutting the Indian Ocean region, wherein you also find arcs of instability. You find fountainheads of terrorism and radicalization. You have warlike situations taking place in close proximity in the Indian Ocean littoral. So India's priorities, including on IUU in the Indian Ocean, which involves a very big neighbor of India's, is slightly different from the other 3 countries. And yet there is total agreement on the need to have freedom of navigation and overflight and unimpeded commerce and things like that.
Right, sir. And sir, Quad is an important group, but it is not the only one in the region. So there is then there is URUS, then there is Quad. So are these groups part of the new international security system being formed to counter the global challenges, or if I can say China's military posture in the region?
I would say, broadly speaking, since multilateral structures represented by the United Nations, especially the United Nations Security Council and affiliate Bretton Woods structures like the World Bank and the IMF are in fact being eroded by the day due to major power contestation, they have not been able to address the key needs of this contemporary period. They have not been able to resolve matters of peace and security. They have not been able to prevent wars. They have not been able to muster up the kind of finance required to meet the climate challenge. They have not been able to ensure that the countries of the global south, including large numbers in Africa that are under financial and economic duress, get the necessary assistance required for post-COVID economic recovery. All this is leading many countries to look for like-minded partners to work together, primarily in a bilateral, trilateral or plurilateral context. So the Quad in fact epitomizes that trend, and as you said, there may be many other groupings, including many that may involve India as well in bilateral or plurilateral partnerships. But this is among the most important because if you look at the swathe of territory that describes the Indo-Pacific, then we are bookending this geography as very important countries. On the one flank you have the United States of America, still the world's largest economy at about $28 trillion and beginning to grow once again. You have on the other hand Japan, which is also the world's third largest economy, the world's second largest developed economy even today. You have Australia, which is a very large continent-sized country situated in an extremely important part of the Indo-Pacific, overlooking both the Indian Ocean and the Pacific. And then at the other end, you have India, which is the world's fastest growing large economy, and now the 5th largest. And these are also countries that have made major contributions to the global good in the past. Countries like Japan, for example, Japan is a very peaceful, peace-loving country, assisting a large number of other countries through its
You were posted
ODA.
in Japan. So
Yes, I was ambassador to Japan for 3 years between 2015 and 2018.
Right, sir. So we'll talk about the economic part of it. But, since we're talking about Indo-Pacific, so India's Act East policy and Indo-Pacific vision, aims to strengthen ties with ASEAN countries as well. So, and India recently offered a line of credit to Vietnam on the recent visit of their Prime Minister to India, where PM Modi emphasized joint effort for a rule-based Indo-Pacific and supporting development over expansionism. So, sir, how does India's assistance to ASEAN countries align with its goal for free, open and secure Indo-Pacific region?
Well, as you are aware, Namrata, the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue has always regarded ASEAN as one of the key pieces of the puzzle. The centrality of ASEAN is often spoken about, and central it is, because when you look at the broad geography, the connective tissue between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean is in fact the South China Sea, and the oceans are seamless. They've always been seamless. Even in the medieval times, in the age of exploration, it is these oceans that were always interconnected and in fact facilitated the spread of colonialism.
Right.
So the fact of the matter is that ASEAN is extremely important. There are 10 countries there. We have seen how over the decades they have gradually become more dependent on, for example, the People's Republic of China for their economic prosperity. Some have also become quite close to China. For example, Cambodia, Laos, and one should perhaps also include Myanmar in this, the CLM countries close to China, for example, on security issues.
Right.
On the other hand, traditionally, their prosperity and security was driven by their close relations with the United States and other major powers, including the United Kingdom. So when you look at the ASEAN, you see something that's extremely important between the Indian and the Pacific Oceans. What the ASEAN does with regard to the dispute many of them have with China in the South China Sea currently involves just them and China. For example, in the discussions to finalize the draft code of conduct, it basically involves China on the one side and ASEAN on the other side. But what they come out with in terms of outcomes in the code of conduct, as and when it is finalized, it hasn't been for the last 22 years, will affect the rest of us.
Right.
So it's very important, therefore, to have good relations with ASEAN. They are among the most prolific in terms of economic growth and development. You are aware that all global growth has shifted. New global growth has shifted to the Asia Pacific, or more fundamentally to the Indo-Pacific.
Indo-Pacific, yes.
New global growth.
Right.
And it's not just China that contributes to new global growth, it's also India that contributes to such growth, and also several ASEAN countries. Vietnam, that you mentioned, is a very exciting prospect in terms of its economic profile. It has very good relations with China. It has very good relations with Japan, increasingly very good relations with India, works also with Australia and the United States. So these are very important countries. But could I just add something that's fundamentally important?
Yeah.
The Asia Pacific is a concept that had its resonance and salience in the second half of the last century. From 1945 to roughly the end of that century, we saw that the Asia Pacific was the term to be used because at the end of the Great War, Japan rose from the ashes of the Second World War, phoenix-like, and became once again a very powerful economy. It became a manufacturing center that sold its manufactured goods across the Pacific to the United States of America, that one big large market with which, if you have a benevolent relationship, you can expect to grow and prosper. That's what happened to Japan in the aftermath. In Japan's wake, you also had the Asian tigers like Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, which also grew in the same manner with access to the US market. By the end of that century, we found that growth, economic growth and development was spreading beyond that one small niche geography in East Asia or Southeast Asia, moving towards Bangladesh, towards India, towards the dynamic littoral countries of Africa. So today it is the Indo-Pacific that is more representative, more open, more democratic, more inclusive, and more in tune with the aspirations of a much larger swathe of geography and many more people. To deny the Indo-Pacific is to deny equality, to deny democracy. The Asia-Pacific, extremely important, has outlived its shelf life. It's the Indo-Pacific that's here to stay.
Yes,
we are very much a central part of that.
Yes, sir. Since we were talking about, fastest growing large economy, and sir, in your latest book, Global Tumult, let me tell our viewers that this is the book. It's released last month, right, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
this has been released by Rupa Publications just last month.
Lovely, sir.
Yeah. Global Tumult, India as a pole star.
Tell us something about this book, sir.
So this is a sequel, as you know, to my earlier book, which is World Upside Down. India recalibrates its geopolitics. This was published by HarperCollins just last year.
Right.
And they have a certain connecting line between these two books, because both books are about the rise of India. Both books are about India as a major economic power, growing in strength, having a stable economy, having a stable government. It matters because the world is in flux. There is a great deal of tumult taking place all around. There is a war raging in its third year in Ukraine. There is another extremely debilitating war that's taking place between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. But I'd say when you look around, you will find, including in South Asia, India emerges as a bastion of relative tranquility, peace, stability, and continued economic growth. So these books are about India's rise, but they're also about the fact that many changes have taken place in our region. There are many challenges. A considerable part of this book, in fact, is about the neighborhood first policy, about our relations with China, defense, economics and reforms, our relations with Japan, the Indo-Pacific, the boundary dispute, and so on and so forth.
And in your book, you have also mentioned, about the India's foreign and defense policies that you think have positioned this country as a beacon of progress in the era of instability. Tell us something about that, sir.
Yeah, before I come to that, I think the main point I'd like to make in answer to your question, in response to your question, is that this book, particularly Global Tumult, the second one, is also about our leadership of the G20 and our being a true representative of the global South.
Yes, sir, you were chair of the Think 20
I was
group.
I was privileged to be the chair of the Think 20 group of the G20. And we pulled it off quite successfully with about 65 events of our own, mostly around the country, but several overseas as well, with that broad approach of leaving no one behind, which is also, I would say, the approach that the UN is taking with regard to the fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, the UN 2030 agenda.
And the world is one family.
Exactly. And so it's this ability of India to provide guidance, to point to a values-based future that in fact is also a central part of its foreign policy.
Right.
Because India is a country that has always tried to contribute to the global good, not necessarily as a major power that seeks a transactional response on the part of its friends and interlocutors, but in a pro bono manner. An astonishing example of that was the ability of India, the willingness of India to provide more than 100 million, 150 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine to more than 100 countries around the world without expecting anything in return. And we did this even as we were in the midst of vaccinating our own people. And we did this when other major powers that had the same ability to produce vaccines and distribute them with much bigger economic power were in fact hoarding their vaccines. So this is the central feature of our foreign policy, which has allowed us also to emerge as a sincere representative voice of the global South. We don't always have to be leaders. We can be friends, we can be helpful, we can work with countries of the global South, including in our neighborhood, including in the maritime sphere with island countries, at a level at which they are comfortable. And that's what makes us a representative, a true voice of the global South. So I think in our defense policy also, you will see that we juxtapose quite comfortably our deep civilizational commitment to peace and non-violence. And this has been our legacy from the times of Buddha to Mahatma Gandhi. But we've also shown great capacity for using force in self-defense or to stand on the side of righteousness if need be. And that is something that India has done very well.
So one thing I would like to talk about in this conversation, that when we were talking about war and this volatile global situation, given the significant role of unmanned aerial vehicles in modern warfare, so I would like to understand how have drones altered the dynamics of military operations and what implications does this have for the national security? Are drones becoming a new tools of war?
Very much so. I think when we look at the emerging wars, the modern wars that are taking place around us, a key feature is that often they are hybrid, often they involve asymmetry between warring countries, and technology is in fact playing a key role in the outcomes on the battlefield. So the days of the rough and tumble of trench warfare of the type that we saw in the First World War and the Second World War, less so in the Second World War, because by then there was a lot of mechanized infantry, and there were tanks and armored vehicles, and there were fighter planes also, much more in evidence than in the First World War. We have seen that that particular era of simply massing troops and rushing them out across an open field with rifles and bayonets is all over. In fact, that had ended with the advent of the machine gun. The Gatling gun itself had ensured, even in the First World War, that you could simply mow down hundreds of troops with a single automatic machine gun. But today we are looking at technology racing ahead by leaps and bounds, and drones are a particular manifestation of the power of technology, because drones have in fact shown their ability to deliver ordnance, for example, in small quantities, to conduct aerial surveillance. The bigger drones are capable of doing much more at greater heights with regard to ISR, or with regard to, if they are armed, to delivering ordnance also. A very big example is, for example, the Armenia-Azerbaijan war, where drones played a key role in decimating tanks that were deployed, for example, by Armenia, the Bayraktar drones that Azerbaijan had acquired from Turkey, for example. We have seen how drones have also been used by Hamas to deliver small ordnance, single grenades to extremely sophisticated watchtowers along a highly vigilant fence or some kind of encampment built by the Israelis around their country. So drones are cheap, they are easy to assemble, they are easy to buy, both commercially, and they are often dual use. We have seen how in Ukraine also both sides are using drones. So countries like Turkey and Iran have actually emerged as large drone manufacturers. In India also the drone industry is moving forward, and we should in fact focus much more than before on the sophistication of drones. For me, drones are not really there to provide any kind of entertainment, but they are very potent parts of the emerging battlefield.
Right. Well, that was an insightful discussion, sir. Thank you, Ambassador Chinoy, for joining us on this podcast today. Well, viewers, that is all I have for you in this podcast. Stay tuned and thanks for watching Sunset TV.